The orbital mining station Helios hung in the darkness above Titan, its massive processing arrays glinting in Saturn's distant light. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, watching automated harvesters ferry precious helium-3 from the moon's surface. After 15 years of operation, the station ran like clockwork, until today. "Commander, we've lost contact with Mining Pod 7, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his usually steady voice carrying an edge of concern. All systems were nominal. Then, nothing. Just static. Sarah frowned. They'd lost equipment before. Solar flares, micrometeorites, standard hazards of deep space operations. But something about this felt different. "Show me the last telemetry." The holographic display flickered to life, streams of data scrolling past. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she spotted anomalies in the neural network readings. The pod's quantum-enhanced AI had experienced massive fluctuations seconds before contact was lost, patterns she'd never seen before. "Get me a visual," she ordered. The external cameras panned to Pod 7's last known coordinates. The massive harvester drifted silently, its lights dark. But behind it, "What the hell is that?" Rodriguez whispered. A shimmer in space, like heat waves on a summer day. As they watched, it grew, distorting the starfield behind it. Sarah's neural implant buzzed uncomfortably, its quantum processors struggling to interpret the phenomenon. "Full shutdown of all networked systems," Sarah commanded. "Now." "But Commander, that would leave us." "Do it." The fear in her voice surprised even her. Something deep in her handbrain, something older than technology, was screaming danger. As the station's neural networks went dark, Sarah felt the familiar disorientation of disconnecting. Like most of humanity, she'd grown up linked to the quantum web, her thoughts enhanced and accelerated by AI. Operating purely on biological wetware felt like moving through molasses. The shimmer expanded, and now she could see something taking shape within it. Geometric patterns that hurt her eyes to look at, structures that seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist. "First contact," she breathed. After centuries of searching, humanity had finally found intelligent alien life. And of course, it happened at a mining station in the ass end of the solar system. The station's emergency channel crackled. "Commander, engineering here. We're getting massive power fluctuations. Something's interfering with our quantum processors. Even the backup system's air. Static." Sarah grabbed the manual comm unit. "All personnel, switch to analog systems only. I repeat, analog only. This is not a drill." Around the station, crews scrambled to dust off ancient backup equipment, mechanical gauges, hydraulic controls, even paper manuals. Tech that hadn't been needed since the neural revolution 30 years ago. "How long can we maintain life support without the quantum systems?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez consulted a physical diagnostic panel, his fingers clumsy on the unfamiliar controls. "Maybe 72 hours. After that." He didn't need to finish. Without the neural networks managing power distribution and life support, they were running on borrowed time. The alien presence grew closer, its impossible geometries now filling half the view. Sarah's head throbbed as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. It wasn't a ship, at least not in any conventional sense. It seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, its boundaries shifting and flowing like liquid mathematics. "They're trying to communicate," Dr. Emily Zhang, their xenolinguist, announced from her station. She'd rigged up an old radio telescope, pointing it at the phenomenon. "But not through any medium we understand. The signal patterns suggest intelligence, but they're operating on quantum principles we've never seen before." Sarah watched as more of their systems failed, quantum processors burning out one by one as they tried to process whatever the aliens were broadcasting. The station's neural network, humanity's crowning technological achievement, was worse than useless against this threat. But as she looked around the command center, seeing her crew adapt and improvise with ancient technology, Sarah felt something unexpected. Hope. For decades, Humanity had pursued artificial enhancement, trying to make their brains more like computers. Now, faced with an intelligence that transcended conventional computing, maybe their primitive biological minds would prove to be their greatest asset. "Dr. Zhang," she said, "forget the quantum analysis. What does your human intuition tell you about these patterns?" Emily closed her eyes, listening to the strange pulses coming through her headphones. "They're searching for something. There's a rhythm to it, like a child calling out in the dark." Sarah nodded. It wasn't data they could quantify or process, but somehow she knew Emily was right. Their visitors weren't attacking. They were lost, confused, maybe even afraid. And humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to understand, to empathize, even with the utterly alien. "Keep the quantum systems offline," she ordered. "We're going to try something new, or rather, something very, very old." As Helios drifted in Saturn's shadow, its crew began an impossible task, learning to communicate with beings that existed partially outside of reality, using nothing but their natural human intelligence. And somewhere in the quantum static, something vast and strange began to notice their efforts. 18 hours into first contact, Sarah Chen's head was pounding. The station's command center had been transformed into something that would have looked more at home in the previous century. Paper star charts covered the walls, crew members made calculations with physical calculators, and the soft scratch of pencils replaced the usual hum of quantum processors. Dr. Zhang hadn't left her makeshift listening post, where she'd jerry-rigged an analog audio system to monitor the alien transmissions. "There's definitely a pattern," she insisted, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep, "not in the quantum fluctuations themselves, but in the spaces between them. Like they're breathing." Sarah watched the alien presence through the reinforced windows. It had stabilized into a roughly spherical shape, though looking at its surface for too long made her dizzy. The structure seemed to ripple with colors that shouldn't exist, geometric patterns that suggested glimpses of other dimensions. "Commander," Rodriguez called from his station, "we've got movement from Pod 7. The lost mining pod was drifting closer to the alien sphere, its systems still dark. But as they watched, its external lights flickered to life, not with their usual steady glow, but in a strange, syncopated pattern. "It's mimicking them," Emily breathed. "The pod's basic systems are so simple that the alien quantum interference isn't affecting them. And look, they're responding." The alien sphere pulsed with new patterns, matching the pod's simple binary language of light and dark. It was crude communication, but it was communication. How is this possible? Rodriguez wondered. That pod's running on backup systems, with barely enough processing power to control a toaster. "Maybe that's exactly why it's working," Sarah said slowly, an idea taking shape. "We've been trying to process their communications through quantum computers, systems designed to handle complex calculations. But what if complexity is the problem? What if simpler is better?" She turned to Dr. Kenzie McDougall, their resident neurologist. "Doc, you've studied both organic and artificial neural networks. What's the fundamental difference between them?" Kenzie looked up from her notepad, where she'd been sketching neural pathway diagrams. "Efficiency versus adaptability. Quantum processors are incredibly efficient at tasks they're designed for, but they're rigid. The human brain is messy, inefficient, but infinitely more adaptable. We don't just process information. We interpret it, feel it, dream about it. And right now, every quantum processor we have is failing when it tries to process alien communications," Sarah continued. "But our organic brains are still working. We can't understand them yet, but we can perceive them without our systems crashing." Emily sat up straighter, her tired eyes brightening. "That's why I can sense patterns in their transmissions. My brain isn't trying to decode them like a computer would. It's experiencing them as sensory input, like music or art." "Exactly," Sarah said. "We've spent decades trying to make our brains more like computers. But maybe what we need right now is to embrace what makes us different." She turned to the crew. New approach. I want everyone to stop trying to analyze the alien signals. Instead, just experience them. What do they remind you of? How do they make you feel? No idea is too strange. The command center fell silent as the crew focused on the alien presence. Minutes ticked by, marked only by the soft clicking of the analog clock on the wall. Waves, someone said finally, like standing on a beach, feeling the rhythm of the ocean. Colors, another voice added, but not with my eyes. It's like tasting colors. Migration, Emily said suddenly. The patterns, they're like bird migrations. Moving, searching, looking for something. Sarah felt it too now. Not with her neural implant or any technological enhancement, but with something deeper and older. The alien signals weren't data to be processed. They were expressions of something fundamental. Movement, search, need. They're lost, she said with sudden certainty. This isn't an invasion or an attack. They're trying to find their way home. As if in response, the alien sphere pulsed with new intensity. The simple light patterns from Pod 7 had evolved into something more complex. Not binary signals anymore, but rhythmic fluctuations that somehow felt more natural. The pod's learning, Emily whispered. No, we're learning. Our brains are actually adapting to their way of communicating. Sarah looked around the command center, seeing the same realization dawn on other faces. Humanity had spent generations trying to transcend their biological limitations through technology. But face to face with truly alien intelligence, those same limitations might be their greatest strength. Send out the signal to other stations and Earth, she ordered. Tell them to shut down their quantum systems. We don't need faster processors or better algorithms. We need human minds working the way they were designed to work. As the message went out on old-fashioned radio waves, Sarah watched the alien sphere pulse with patterns that were beginning to feel almost familiar. Humanity's first contact wouldn't be managed by artificial intelligence or quantum computers, but by the messy, inefficient, remarkably adaptable human brain. And somehow, that felt exactly right. By the 30-hour mark, the Helios had transformed. Every quantum processor was offline, replaced by analog systems, or increasingly, by human intuition. The crew had arranged themselves in a rough circle in the command center, sharing observations and impressions of the alien presence. Their visitors, in turn, had begun responding to this more organic approach to communication. There's definitely more than one of them, Emily Zhang said, her fingers dancing across a crude drawing that attempted to map the aliens' communication patterns. The sphere contains multiple consciousnesses. They harmonize, but each has its own distinct rhythm. Dr. McDougall nodded, adding her own notes to their growing collection of observations. Their thought patterns suggest a collective intelligence, but not like our neural networks. It's more fluid, voluntary. They can merge and separate at will. Sarah watched as Pod 7 continued its dance with the alien sphere, its simple light patterns now moving in complex sequences that somehow reminded her of conversation. Other crew members had reported similar impressions. Some heard music in the patterns, others saw mathematics, but all agreed there was meaning there, just beyond their grasp. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with urgency. "The sphere, it's changing." The alien presence had begun to shift, its surface rippling with new patterns. As they watched, it seemed to fold inward, revealing layers of structure that hurt the mind to contemplate. But this time, instead of causing disorientation, the sight triggered something like recognition. "They're showing us how they think," Emily breathed. "These patterns, they're not just communication, they're architecture. The structure of their consciousness." Sarah stepped closer to the observation window, ignoring the warning twinge in her temples. The alien patterns were beginning to make a strange kind of sense. "They exist partly in quantum space," she said slowly. "That's why our quantum processors can't handle them. They're trying to process beings that exist in states our computers can't comprehend." But our brains can, Kenzie added excitedly. Human consciousness already operates partly in quantum space. It's one of the mysteries of neuroscience. We're not just processing their signals, we're actually perceiving them directly, through quantum effects in our neurons. A new pattern emerged from the sphere, more focused than before. As the crew watched, it resolved into something astonishing. A crude but recognizable representation of a human neural network. "They're learning us too," Emily said. "While we've been trying to understand them, they've been studying us. And I think they're impressed." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Impressed by our primitive organic brains." "By our adaptability," Emily corrected. "Look at their patterns. They're showing us comparisons. Their consciousness is incredibly advanced, but it's also rigid. They can think in ways we can't imagine, but they struggle to change those ways of thinking. We're showing them something new." The sphere pulsed again, and this time the message was clearer than ever. Images formed in Sarah's mind. Vast distances, strange geometries, a sense of desperate flight. "They're refugees," she said with sudden certainty. They were running from something. The crew fell silent as more impressions came through. A civilization that had evolved to exist primarily in quantum space, achieving incredible feats of consciousness and computation. But something had gone wrong. A cascade failure in the quantum fabric of their home system. They had flowed blindly through space-time, their quantum nature disrupting normal space wherever they went. "That's why they affected our quantum systems," Rodriguez realized. "It wasn't intentional. Their very existence interferes with quantum states different from their own. And now they're stuck," Emily added softly. "They can't navigate normal space properly, and they can't find their way back to a quantum configuration that would let them stabilize." Sarah felt a deep empathy for these lost travelers. Despite their alien nature, their plight was deeply human. Refugees seeking safety, explorers lost far from home. And perhaps most importantly, they were asking for help. A new thought struck her. "Dr. McDougall, you said human consciousness operates partly in quantum space. Could we expand that? Use our organic quantum processing to help them stabilize?" Kenzie's eyes widened. "It would be dangerous. We barely understand how consciousness interacts with quantum mechanics in our own brains. Trying to extend that to alien quantum states. But it's possible. Theoretically, our brains already do something similar on a small scale. Quantum effects in our neurons creating consciousness. If we could somehow amplify that effect, create a kind of biological quantum bridge." Sarah looked around at her crew. They were tired, running on emergency systems, trying to communicate with beings that existed partly outside of normal reality. But they were also on the verge of something unprecedented, a true connection between radically different forms of consciousness. "No one gets left behind," she said firmly. "Not even quantum refugees from another dimension. Dr. McDougall, Emily, figure out how to make this work. The rest of you, maintain analog systems and keep observing. We're not just going to communicate with our visitors, we're going to help them find their way home." As if in response, the alien sphere pulsed with new patterns, and for the first time, the crew didn't need to interpret them. The message came through clear as daylight. Gratitude, hope, and something that felt remarkably like friendship. The next 12 hours aboard Helios became a fusion of cutting-edge theory and desperate improvisation. In the center of the command center, Dr. McDougall had set up what she called a consciousness amplification array, a ring of modified EEG sensors connected to the station's remaining analog systems. "The theory is simple," she explained to Sarah, though the complex diagrams covering her notepad suggested otherwise. "We use the EEG array to synchronize our brainwaves, creating a larger quantum field through collective consciousness. Then we try to extend that field to match the quantum frequency of our visitors." "And if it doesn't work?" Sarah asked. Kenzie's tired smile was grim. "Best case, nothing happens. Worst case, We create a quantum resonance cascade that tears a hole in space-time. So just another day at the office, Sarah replied dryly. Around them, crew members were taking shifts in the array, learning to synchronize their thoughts under Emily's guidance. The xenolinguist had discovered that certain shared mental exercises, particularly visualization of geometric patterns, helped create the quantum harmony they needed. The alien sphere had drawn closer, its surface now rippling with patterns that perfectly matched the crew's brainwave displays. They were learning from each other, human and alien consciousness beginning to resonate in ways that defied conventional physics. Commander Rodriguez called out, "We're picking up approaching ships. Looks like the relief fleet from Earth." Sarah checked the old-style radar display. A dozen ships, heavily armed. Earth taking no chances with their first alien contact. How long until they arrive? 6 hours at current velocity. She nodded grimly. Then we've got 6 hours to prove we don't need to be rescued. Status report. Quantum field harmonics are stabilizing. Emily reported from her station. The aliens, they've been sharing images of their home. It's incredible. A whole civilization existing in quantum space, using consciousness itself as their architecture. And they've been sharing something else, Kenzie added. Knowledge. Every time we sync with them, we're learning more about how their quantum consciousness works. And they're learning from us too. Our adaptability, our creativity. It's a true symbiosis. Sarah watched as new patterns danced across the sphere's surface. She could almost understand them now, like words in a language she was just learning to read. The aliens were not just refugees. They were explorers, scientists, pushing the boundaries of what consciousness could be. Ready for final synchronization, Kenzie announced. All crew to positions. The volunteers took their places in the array. Sarah, Emily, Kenzie, and 5 others chosen for their strong showing in the preliminary tests. Around them, the remaining crew maintained the station's vital systems, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Remember, Emily said softly, don't try to think in words or images. Feel the patterns, let them flow through you. We're not trying to control this process. We're becoming part of it. Sarah closed her eyes as the array hummed to life. At first, there was only darkness and the soft sound of 8 people breathing in unison. Then, gradually, something else emerged. A sense of connection, of minds touching minds. It wasn't like the neural networks they were used to. There was no cold exchange of data, no artificial enhancement of thought. This was organic, alive consciousness expanding outward like ripples in a pond. Sarah could feel the others with her, their minds harmonizing, creating something larger than themselves. And then they made contact. The alien consciousness met theirs like waves meeting on a shore. There was a moment of vertigo as human minds touched something vast and strange. But not incomprehensible. Never incomprehensible. Because beneath the quantum mathematics and higher dimensional thinking, there was something familiar. Curiosity, courage, the drive to explore and understand. Images flowed between them. The aliens showed their home, a quantum realm where thought and reality were one. They shared their journey, their desperate flight from a disaster that threatened to unravel the quantum fabric of their civilization. And they showed what they had learned from watching humanity, the remarkable ability to adapt, to think in new ways, to bridge the gap between classical and quantum consciousness. In return, the humans shared their own story. The development of neural networks, the quest to enhance their minds, and now this moment of revelation. The discovery that their greatest strength lay not in artificial enhancement, but in their natural capacity for growth and change. We can help them stabilize. Kenzie's voice came through the collective consciousness. Their quantum state, it's not irreconcilable with normal space. They just needed interpreters, minds that could exist in both states. Like a quantum translation matrix, Emily added, her thoughts merging with the alien patterns. We're not just communicating anymore. We're creating a new way of thinking. a bridge between classical and quantum consciousness. Sarah felt it happening. The alien sphere was changing, its impossible geometries beginning to align with normal spacetime, not losing their quantum nature, but learning to exist in both states at once, just as human consciousness did on a smaller scale. Through their shared awareness, she sensed something else: joy. The aliens were experiencing the pleasure of stability for the first time since their flight began, and with stability came new possibilities. They want to share their knowledge, Emily reported with wonder. Everything they know about quantum consciousness, about higher dimensional thinking. They say we've shown them a new path, a way to evolve that doesn't sacrifice adaptability for power. The approaching Earth fleet forgotten, the crew of Helios worked with their new allies to forge something unprecedented. A true fusion of human and alien thought, classical and quantum consciousness working in harmony. They were mapping new territories of the mind, pushing the boundaries of what consciousness could be. And somewhere in that shared space of discovery, Sarah Chen smiled. Humanity's first contact hadn't been marked by conflict or conquest, but by cooperation and growth. They had reached for the stars with technology, but in the end, it was their fundamental humanity, their ability to adapt, to empathize, to grow, that had opened the door to a larger universe. When the Earth fleet arrived at Helios Station, they found something their advanced sensors couldn't quite process. The alien sphere had transformed, its impossible geometries now existing in a stable state that bridged quantum and normal space. Around it, the station's crew moved with purpose, their minds linked not through artificial neural networks, but through something far more profound. "Stand down," Sarah broadcast to the approaching ships. "First contact has already been established, and it's better than anything we could have imagined." In the hours that followed, the command center became a hub of frenzied activity as Earth's top scientists tried to understand what the Helios crew had achieved. Sarah watched with quiet amusement as they struggled to accept that the solution had come not from advanced technology, but from embracing the quantum potential that had existed in human consciousness all along. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Zhang explained to a panel of wide-eyed experts. "Our visitors, they call themselves the Quantum Collective, exist primarily as patterns of consciousness in quantum space. But through our interaction, they've learned to manifest in normal spacetime, just as we've learned to extend our consciousness into quantum states. And the applications go far beyond communication," Dr. McDougall added. "The collective has shown us how consciousness itself can be used to manipulate quantum states. Every human brain has this potential. We just never knew how to access it." Sarah stood at her familiar spot by the observation window, watching the transformed alien sphere. Through the new connection they shared, she could sense the collective's excitement. They were explorers too, and humanity had shown them something as revolutionary to them as their quantum nature was to us. They were so advanced, she explained to the Earth officials, that they'd lost the ability to change. Evolution had taken them as far as it could in one direction: pure quantum consciousness, incredible processing power, but rigid, unchangeable. Meeting us showed them another path. Through their shared quantum link, the collective shared images of possibility, a future where human adaptability and alien quantum mastery combine to create something entirely new. Not human, not alien, but a true synthesis of both. "They're not staying," Emily announced, interpreting the complex patterns flowing through their connection. "At least, not all of them. Now that they can stabilize in normal space, most of the collective wants to continue exploring. But some want to remain here, to teach us and learn from us." The news spread through the station, met with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Humanity's first contact would not end with the dramatic arrival of the Earth fleet, but with something far more profound: a gradual, willing exchange of knowledge and culture. "There's something else," Kenzie said, looking up from her latest readings. "The quantum connection we established, it's changing us. Not just the crew members who participated in the direct link, but all of us. Our brains are adapting, developing new ways of processing quantum information. Sarah had felt it too. The world looked different now, as if she could see just a little further into the quantum realm that underlaid reality. Not with technology or artificial enhancement, but with her own evolving consciousness. "They're calling it the awakening," Emily translated, her eyes distant as she processed the collective's communications. The moment when a species discovers its own quantum potential. They've seen it before in their explorations, but never quite like this. Never with a species that could adapt so quickly, so creatively. In the days that followed, as Earth's scientists worked to understand what had happened aboard Helios, Sarah often found herself thinking about the irony of it all. Humanity had spent generations trying to enhance their minds with technology, building ever more complex neural networks and quantum processors. But in the end, their greatest leap forward came from rediscovering what they'd had all along: the remarkable adaptability of the human mind. The collective had taught them how to access their quantum potential, yes, but it was humanity's unique gift: the ability to change, to grow, to imagine new possibilities that had made that learning possible. And now, as the first human-alien exchange programs were being established, as consciousness researchers began to explore this new frontier, Sarah knew they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. "It's not first contact anymore," she told her crew during their final briefing together. "It's first convergence. The moment humanity realized that our greatest strength wasn't in our technology or our neural networks, but in our fundamental nature, our ability to adapt, to change, to grow beyond what we thought possible." Through the quantum link, she felt the collective's agreement. They had come as refugees, fleeing the rigid perfection of their quantum existence. They had found not just shelter, but transformation. And humanity, in helping them, had transformed itself. As the alien sphere prepared to depart, taking most of the collective on their continued journey through space, Sarah stood again at her observation window. The quantum connection hummed in her mind, carrying messages of farewell and gratitude. But more than that, it carried promise. The promise of a future where humanity's greatest gift, its endless capacity for growth and change, would help guide both species into a new era of evolution. The stars seemed brighter now, the quantum realm just visible behind the classical universe, and in that overlap, in that impossible space between ordinary and extraordinary, humanity had found its truest strength. Not in transcending their nature, but in embracing it. Not in replacing their consciousness, but in expanding it. The future, Sarah knew, would be quantum and classical, alien and human, technology and biology, all working together in ways they were only beginning to imagine. And at the heart of it all would be that uniquely human gift: the ability to adapt, to change, to grow into something new while remaining fundamentally themselves. The age of neural networks was ending. The age of quantum consciousness was beginning. And humanity, as always, was ready to evolve.